coming up on a crater by the name of Tsiolkovsky. Russians named most of the craters on the backside of the moon, as a matter of fact. But anyway, as we got close, the shadow portion of the crater being cast by the sun hitting the rim of the crater, casting a shadow down the bottom, there was a cluster, it looked like about 5 domes all clustered together down in this dark shadow portion of Tsiolkovsky, and it looked like something like a plume or a column sticking up above the crater rim. So as we've approached Tsiolkovsky, and we've got this cluster of lights down in the darkened shadow area of it, Dr. Page says, freeze, stop, back up, had me reverse 2 or 3 times, zoom in close on it, and then back up. He says, hold it. And he turned around to the other 7 scientists, and he looked at them, and he says, well, boys, what do you think of that? And they all chuckled and laughed like it was an inside joke, like they knew what was there. Were classified as secret. You had to have at least a secret clearance to get in there. So I took the film in, checked it in, left for the day. The next day I was to check out that same film and take it to the main auditorium at NASA in Houston and show it for the rank and file engineers that were present there. I had 2 or 3 of my other friends show up with me because I wanted them to see what we'd found on the backside of the moon. And I set the film up, we're showing it, we're coming up on the Tsiolkovsky crater, looking for the shadow area. The spacecraft obviously flew right over it, and there was nothing in the bottom of the crater. I stopped the camera, told the audience, I said, I'm having technical difficulties. I checked the film to see if it had been cut and spliced. There were no cut and splices on it. The only answer I can give you is that in 24 hours from the time I checked it in to the bondage storage and checked it out, it had to have been taken out, cut, spliced, airbrushed out, spliced back in, and a whole duplicate reel made so that it was a smooth transition, and it wasn't there. When I
intended to go. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab, and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. On that lunar orbiter, I don't know. And this also always brings to question, in my mind, why we're getting such low resolution on photographs that we receive from Mars and any of these other missions. The resolution of these photographs is very low, when we've had, since the early 60s, a capability of much higher resolution. So I'm not sure what that's all about. That question always comes up in my mind. If I compare it to what I'm seeing now, because I do have photographs that have artifacts in them that are similar to what I saw, they're massive. Some of the structures are, half a mile in size. So they're huge structures in covering it up. And I felt it was time to get beyond that. There's a lot more weight to this than I realized. A lot more cover-up than I realized. Yeah, a lot more deception than I realized was going on. Well, some of the shapes, as I said, some of the buildings were very tall, thin structures. I don't know how tall they were, but they must be very tall.
Did you see profile shots of them?
I saw
angular shots with
shadows.
There
were angular shots with shadows. There were spherical and domed buildings, that were very large. They must be, half a mile in scale, because they were, in relationship to the scale of the photograph, they stood out very clearly. They were large objects. It's interesting because I tried to relate them in my own mind to structures here on Earth, and they don't compare to anything that you see here in scale and structure. They're similar to a degree. I tried to relate them to metal structures, and I couldn't see a metal definition. They're more like a stone structure, but a fabricated stone. Some of the buildings seem to have very reflective surfaces on them. A couple of structures that I saw reminded me of cooling towers at power generating plants. They had that sort of a shape. Some of them were just very, very straight and tall with a flat top. Some of them were round. Some of them looked like a Quonset hut, with a domed kind of like a greenhouse.
And all of these buildings were clustered together centrally?
The particular shot that I saw, there were several clustered together over a landscape, a fairly large landscape. Mm-hmm. There was one building that had a dish-like shape to it, but it was very large. It looked like a radar dish, but it was a building.
Here, you want to read? Loud and clear. 7, go ahead. I'll tell you at 10 o'clock high. This is Houston. Say again, 7. I'll tell you at 10 o'clock high. An object which is at the same place all the time but appears to be tumbling. Well, we've had it ever since yesterday. It just seems to be tagging along with us.
October 21st, 1995.
We have an unidentified flying object.
And nothing after.
They said 60 degrees. Well, I tell you, I can't see to the bottom of it, and I'm as close to the edge as I'm going to get.
That's the truth. The crater, they look like drill holes is what they look like. You do that in West Texas and you get a rattlesnake. Here you get permanently shattered soil. How about rolling that one over? No way. Well, Tony, that's your house rock right there. Very good. Don't get too near the edge of that thing. It falls off. Look over at your right. It falls off pretty good. Yeah, I know.
Driving. Huh? Okay, cover on what? Look at the umbilical cover. You suppose that's where it got hit by lightning or something when on because it's brown? Look at the top of it burned. Yep, I do believe that's what got hit. No, maybe it gets burned by probably got to find out. That would be okay. Why don't you move over to the left a little bit and I'll take a picture of it and take a look at it later. Hey, can you drop down little people?
you.